Well, good evening. It's Arlo Johnson and we're in British Columbia at 7:25, November the 12th. Kind of cool, but it's not bad. It's about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And, you're getting pretty close to the middle of November. Pretty good. Days are getting shorter. I mean, I didn't realize they were getting this much shorter, but they just seem to fly that way. When you think it's only a month and a half till the days start to get longer. We're past them, and it'll be past the middle of the year again, or no, end of the year, I guess. I apologize for clearing my throat all the time. It's terrible. I try to keep it down as much as I can. I was going to hopefully talk about something different. I don't know. The thing is, it's hard to understand sometimes about what happens in this world between people, and the difference between ordinary people, men, women, whatever, and a man and his dog, or a woman and his dog, or dog. A dog's allegiance to his master, I guess you'd call it, because I think that's what he considers it to be, is completely different than generally, man to man or whatever. There's some pretty good ones, but the actual level of totality that a dog gives to its master is just about unbelievable. I mean, it is such a rare thing that it's just them that does this. Basically just them. There's really no other animal that will do that. They hold their human master, leader, whatever, owner in such high regard for a animal to understand. I mean, it's like 100% dedication to that person. It just total. Everything. Their life, whatever. And the joy that is built into them to do this. They love doing this. They can't contain themselves sometimes. And that's a hard thing to figure out, how God could have put such a love or a respect or honor into an animal. There's a lot of people go overboard on animals too. They go to the point where they consider them better than humans, which sometimes they actually do and are, but they still are not that. They are still an animal, and they have to be considered an animal at all times. But if you're honest about it and faithful about it, you would be very faithful to that animal, to that dog, and very fair and gentle and true, and because he is 100% in your service. His whole being is to please you, to do what you want him to do. And he tries his best to try to understand that. Yeah, that's why sometimes a real real big bond between a man and his dog, or a woman and his dog too. But it seems like a man and his dog happens a little more, especially if it's an outdoor dog. And well, I shouldn't say that. I mean indoor dogs too, house dogs that people have. I remember my uncle, for instance. He was kind of a rough guy, but he had hunting dogs. He had greyhounds. He'd hunt coyotes with greyhounds in the wintertime. And he had a blue kind of a dog. I don't know what make it was or whatever, but it was just about, fur was just about partially blue, like a stripe of blue around his neck and white going down the front and whatever. And I forget what he called him again. But anyway, I forget. I should remember that. Anyway, when the dog died, he was beside himself. He just hated losing that dog. He dug a hole in the manure pile. He had a big high manure pile, and he couldn't bear to go and bury him there. He had to get someone else to do it. So he got someone to come and bury, what was it, Buster or Blue or something like that, old Blue. And he went to town. He didn't come back for 3 days. He just went to town and he got drunk. He couldn't stand losing his dog. 3 days later, he finally came home. That dog and him were so close that it was like his best friend died, very best friend. So that's something that is kind of strange between humans and animals. I mean, I remember growing up that we had some big Persian horses. One was called Sparky and the other one was called King. Sparky was actually the biggest, in a way, just slightly bigger, but he was more muscular and whatever, and he was absolutely smart. King was a terrible horse because he had to be, he was balky. If he had to pull a heavy load, he'd pull a little in and jump back, and Sparky would end up having to pull the whole thing himself. And Sparky would hate it. He'd get mad at him. But anyway, Sparky was one of a kind. There's no doubt about it. I remember we grew up playing around him, over him, under him, and he was big. We had to climb up on things to get on top of him. And I remember, we'd go to town and we might forget to close the gate down by the water tank that went out to the pasture. We'd come home, Sparky would be standing in the gate. Wouldn't let anybody go out, horses, cows, anyone. And we farmed with horses for a long time. We had about 20 horses we were farming with. And we were farming, this was a pretty big farm, and it was flat as can be. And when we were plowing, we'd start at like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and we wouldn't stop at noon. We'd go right through till 2 o'clock, and then Sparky would just stop, dead on 2 o'clock. He wouldn't go any farther. He wanted to go in and get his feed and water and whatever, and get in the cool of the barn at 2 o'clock. And that's what it had to be every day, from about 9 to 2, about 4, 5, 6 hours. No, that'd be about 5 hours. No more than that. He just refused. And he knew exactly when it was. He'd also stop at 10 o'clock in the morning and look around to see where his sugar lumps were. because every morning I had to have a couple of sugar lumps, and he liked them sugar lumps. But he knew to the minute. He'd stop right on the dot each time. Yeah, and we had to break horses every spring to break new colts and stuff. And what Dad would do is he'd wait till it was raining and muddy as heck, and he'd take the colt out, and he'd get it harnessed, and it'd be jumping and kicking and whatever. And anyway, he'd get it harnessed, and he'd get it hooked up to a wagon in the mud with Sparky. And that was the training day then. It could be raining or whatever else. He went out on the road, a muddy road, slippery road, so the colt couldn't get a good, grip on anything, slipping and sliding in the mud. And if the colt acted up too much, Sparky would reach over, grab him by the neck behind his head, and shove him down right into the mud. He'd shove him right down. And he'd scare him so bad that the colt would just stand there and just shake, hardly dare to move. But he didn't jump around and kick around anymore. That was it. Turn around, go back home, walking very carefully right along, just not, and that was the training deal, and that was breaking horses. That's how he did it. He just did it. Oh yeah, he was a terribly nice horse. Very good. And I felt sad for Dad when he had to sell them. He didn't want to, but finally this guy came and wanted to buy them, so he sold the team to him, and it was like selling his children. Just hard to do. Yeah, that's how things are. Sometimes you get so attached. You can't get that attached to a tractor or a truck. No, I don't think so. I mean, you might like it, but you wouldn't get attached like that. That made a big difference in farming. Farming changed a lot from basically, you could say, from living things to mechanical things. Yeah, and it changed pretty fast, not too fast though. The first tractors were I grew up driving them, and they were rough, and they were hard to drive, and steering was so poor, and steel wheels in the front, and the front wheels were didn't have as much weight on them as they should, and when you tried to turn in the soft ground, like after you've been plowing or something, and tried to turn around to go back again, it would go and go and go, and hard to turn. Take a big circle to turn it, especially if it went uphill a little. Went downhill a little, it worked better. And then a big change to when we got a tractor, rubber tired tractor. Big difference, big difference. What a jump! What a jump in machinery and mechanical things. Huge jump. Yeah, I actually, when I grew up, I was about, I think, 7 or 8 years old, maybe 8, when the last steam engine came through in the fall with pulling a big old thrashing machine, a big one. And it would come down the road, and we were living on this farm, quite a good sized farm. It was over 300 acres. And flat, end-to-end farm. And I remember we were towards the end of the run they had. They had a big run. I think there was 20 teams Guys with, you know, 2 horse teams and a hay rack was called a team. That was a bundle team. They were the ones who hauled the bundles off the field into the big thrashing machine. And it was big enough that they fed it from each side, just shoveling the big uh, bundles in there, just shoveling them in. And, you know, they had 20 teams, so they 2 at a time going up, just steady, all in the field. But by the time they got loaded and whatever, it was time for them to get in again. And the grain was coming, pouring out of the machine, and the straw pile was getting higher and higher. Sometimes it got horrendously high, but the thrashing machine could throw it, you know, like 50 feet up in the air, and then it could turn it and swing it. And I remember one fall. I think that was the fall of the steam engine. The last year it came, and Dad put them out in just, I don't know, about, I guess 150 yards away from the barn, or 100 yards from the barn up in the pasture. And he said, here's where we'll put this big straw pile. And so we did. And that straw pile got bigger and bigger and bigger. When they were all finished and they left, then I think, yes, then Dad turned the pigs out there, let the pigs go to that. And they headed right for the straw pile. We didn't have fence around it or anything. Just went right fence, and they make their home in that straw pile. And they did. They chewed out tunnels in there, about 3 feet high in there, perfectly round tunnels, all through it, going all over the place. Like it would just curve and go through, around, out that side, come in, go in again. And us kids just had a ball in there. That's one thing about it, is pigs never, you know, do their dump or crap or anything in that where they sleep. So there was never any manure in there, none. We could run and play in there, and we'd run into them. They'd get scared and turn around back and run the other way. But, you know, that's different. That's different growing up like that. That's different. Oh, what kids would get to do that nowadays? And we did that all winter. We played in there all winter. I mean, where could you find a warmer place and more fun to chase around and try to chase each other? And we could hide on each other, go down this tunnel, go down that tunnel. That's some different memories, I guess. It's funny how memories flood back. I mean, it really is, you know. Like I had a pony. Dad gave me a little horse when I was 6 years old. And it was a 3/4 horse. It was not a full big horse or anything, and not a small pony or anything. It was about a 3/4 horse, and I swear he must have had some mule in him or something, because he could be stubborn. I rode him to school for years, and later on my sister rode on the back with me, and the two of us would ride into school, 2.5 miles. Yeah, about 2.5 miles. And that went on for a while, and later on I was riding him again because I was going to high school, and I had to take the ride to Coppolaff. I think it was about 3 miles to catch a bus to go to high school. And the thing, to start with, there was no bus. There was a grain truck with a canvas on top. And we rode in the back, and we had blankets over us. And that was it. bouncing it down the road in the back of this truck. Finally, they got a bus. And I had to ride my horse. I think it was about, close to, I think it was pretty near 3 miles. And I had to have feed and stuff there in the corner. And I made a deal with this farmer that I could leave my horse there and feed him. And then when I got off the bus in the afternoon, I'd get on him and ride home. And later on, I just used a bicycle, I guess. And so that went on for a while too. I had that horse for 26 years. Tony. The great wonder horse, Tony. He drove me crazy sometimes. He would be out in the pasture and I'd go, Tony, here, Tony, come on. And he'd look at me and he'd wait till I'd have a pail with a little bit of oats in it and shaking it, and he'd hear that. He liked the oats, And he'd let me get just about to where I could put a rope around his neck or collar or something, and then he'd trot off and stand and look at me and just used to drive me. Oh, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. Then finally it was like, okay. And like if I fell off or something, he'd never leave. He'd just stand right there and he'd wait till I could get up. He wouldn't move. He was perfectly good that way. Always wouldn't leave me at all. Yeah, he was. I used to ride full gallop, chasing horses through the bush, trees, and I rode bareback all the time. And I'd go full gallop through the trees, and I don't know how the heck I did that without hitting something. But he did. He dodged through the trees, and he'd chase the other horses. He'd just chase them. Yeah. Another thing is, I remember when this old guy with a top hat, bowler hat, came driving this buggy, kind of a two-wheeled buggy, and he was driving this big stallion, usually a big white or dapple stallion. And the stallion was so charged up, kind of like, snorting and kind of bouncing sideways down the road. And that was the stallion he came around to service the mares we had. And I thought, oh my gosh. And he had this whip on and driving this big stallion, and a little fat guy with a bowler hat on. And I thought, man, what a kind of a job is this? But anyway, he came around, and that's what they did. And the thing that got me is that stallion was so charged up with he's snorting and bouncing and just going down the road kind of sideways and kind of sweating, but he was just so full of testosterone or something, I don't know. Yeah, just total. We used to sneak around at the back of the barn and watch. Yeah, the things that, well, let's see, gotta wait for a minute. When we moved from this one farm that we were renting, and Dad bought a farm about 5 miles to the north of where we were, half section 320 acre farm. No buildings, no nothing, no well, no nothing. And as it turned out, what what my dad had done was clear off a little site next to the road, sort of, a farm site, you know, and bush and whatever, cleared it off. And he had bought this lodge, a big lodge down by the lake, Miquelon Lake. It was called the Vasa Lodge. It was a big dance floor, huge dance floor, and at the back, across the back of it, was this lean-to kitchen. And he bought it because they were shutting it down. They weren't going to have it anymore. So he bought it, and he went there and he cut it in half. And then he removed the lean-to kitchen at the back off it. Now that was going to be, half of it was going to be the house, and the other half was going to be the barn. That's what he did. And he waited till, November or something like it, I think it was, if I remember right. And he had tractors and whatever, and he had huge big skids. I don't know where he got these long enough skids, but he had them. And he put this hall, half of this hall, and he'd brace up the end that he had cut and put it on there, and he was skidding it down the road. He cut wires and stuff and went across fields, and he skidded that thing about 4 miles. 4 miles, I think. And he skidded it over hills and whatever, and right into our yard, pulled one part down below for the barn, took the skids, took it back, loaded, actually had these big jacks. He had big moving jacks that he lifted this other half of the haul up and put these skids under it again and braced the ends. And he had one tractor in front and one behind because it could start sliding and go. And he pulled the second part up, and he left that up at the front closer to the road. That was going to be the house. Then he went back and he got this back end lean-to that was the kitchen, and he pulled that up there and put it below the house, between the house and the barn, and then had to build the end on that. That was where we lived, while all this other building had to go on. We lived in that. 5 people, 3 kids, and father and mother, and all in one room. The front part was like a kitchen, and the back part was a bedroom. There was, about 3 beds in there, double beds, 2 double beds, and I don't know where, there was another one. Yeah, and later on, that was turned into a chicken house. It was a good-sized chicken house. But anyway, he finally got a basement dug for the house, and with horses. It was all with horses, and what's called a slip. You had to hang on to it. 2 horses pulled it, and it kind of dug in the ground and finally filled up a little, and then you'd push down on it, and it would slide up, and then you'd go in a ways and tip it up, and it would dump it out, go back, do it again, and again, and again, until you got this 8-foot basement. It was a full 8-foot basement. Then he had to hire carpenters, and he had one main carpenter who was going to build the house. So first thing he had to do was frame the basement all by hand, no plywood or nothing. It had to be all, shiplap and 2x4s and whatever, and bracing. He had to do that. And then we had rock, all kinds of rock, and put in the frame, into the, into the forms. So it's just full of rock. And then we poured the concrete in there, and the rocks were big enough that the concrete would just run through all around the rocks and form. And that was a pretty skookum basement. I think it was 8 inches and 8 feet deep. And then that was sticking out of the ground like 2 or 3 feet, close to 3 feet. And then he had this half hall sitting at one end, and it was built up on skids and whatever till it was absolutely level with this concrete basement that had been poured. And what he did was he built planks, and they were sitting, these planks were sitting on skids and whatever else, all shimmed up so they were perfectly level with, not level, they were like 6 inches lower exactly, because he had all these cylinders from engines with a piston in them, and then he used those as a roller. Oh no, he didn't know, there was no pistons in them, no. He used the rollers. They were heavy and strong enough that they could be a roll. Only had lots of them. I don't know how many under each side. Had to be like 10 or 12 rollers on each side. And what he did was, I don't know how he pushed it, but he'd push it along, and he'd put his crowbar through these cylinders and just adjust them and steer it. He could steer it exactly the way he wanted, and it steered it right on top of the concrete, kept going all the way, and when he got to the end, he stopped exactly when it was completely right over the top and square. Then he jacked them up, and he had braces or skid deals inside the basement, and he lifted that, took the cylinders out, and then he let it down with these jacks, just straight down. And I thought that was a pretty smart deal. And it came down exactly right in the corners, exactly. I had to give him real credit for that. You know, no two ways about it. He did a good job of that. He didn't have to do that with the barn. The barn, just, I think we had a footing poured around it, and the barn was set on that. And the one end was built in again, closed off with doors in it, and we had an actual loft in the ceiling up because it was that high. It was high, it could be a loft. Down below we had cattle, horses, pigs, barn door, big barn door on one end. And, well, there was barn door on each end because I'd go through there with a stone boat and haul manure. Drive through there with a little tractor. Yeah, I could tell you a story about that. That's when you're 14 years old and you don't listen. You say, yeah. Oh. I may as well tell you that. They decided that they had to go to town Saturday, and it was decided that I was going to stay home and clean the barn. I was about 14. And the last thing Dad said, okay, you use the tractor to pull the stone bowl in there and pull the manure out and dump it out in this by the slough. But he says don't go too close to the water in the slough because he'll try to tip it off because you don't want to shovel it off. And if you do that, you're liable to slide in with the tractor and everything, and then it'll be all stuck. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, I went there, loaded up the manure, piled it on, got on the tractor. It was a small Alice Chalmers tractor. Went out and thought, well, I think we'll just see if we can get along pretty close to the edge here and kind of tip it. That way it'd be easier for me to. I got along the edge and the manure was too soft, too close to the water, and the tractor just sank to the right and right out into the slough and the manure and the water and everything. I couldn't get it out of it. I had to jump off the tractor. So I went to the house and I thought, now what am I going to do? I was 14. We had a big heart par. We used that for braking. And we'd plowed with it and whatever. It was a big old 2-cylinder boom, 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 boom thing. And big cylinders and, pretty strong tractor. The only thing was, it was horrible to drive because it would have like a 1.5 turns of play in it. Go this way, go that way. And anyway, I thought to myself, I gotta get a big cable. We got a big cable. I'm gonna take this big cable and I'm gonna go in behind the barn on the other side of the slough through this bush and get turned around and get the cable across the water, hook it up to the Alice Chalmers and pull the Alice Chalmers right through the slough out to the other end. It'll pull it through. And I thought, oh. So anyway, I knew how to start this old heart bar. You had to open the petcocks on it and a big flywheel. You had to turn this flywheel and get these big cylinders going. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I had to prime it with distillate. There's little cups on top. And this distillate, was a magneto that would kick out a real big spark in there. And I'd flick it and flick it. And finally, boom, 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 boom. And away it goes. I closed these petcocks off and let it idle for a minute. And I thought, okay, can't let it run this very long without water. I got to get to the water tank. And this will take about 40 gallons of water. So I got up close to the water tank, and I'm looking, and shoot, that's too far away. I can't reach that far. I got to get a little closer. So I'm pushing on the clutch a little bit, and all of a sudden the clutch grabs a little too much, and the tractor rolls ahead about 3 feet. And rolls 3 feet and right into the tank. And this was a wooden staved tank with iron rods going around it. It just collapsed it in. And the water just poured out of there. And I thought, oh, can't do anything about that. That's had it now. I better get a 5-gallon pail and quickly put water in this tractor. So I scooped it up, got it in there, got the tractor. The tank was there, half broken down, half. There was only maybe 8 inches of water left in it. And I thought, oh. So I'm going to go around the house, but below the house, and we had big poplar trees. I mean, they were like 1.5 feet big. They were big. And there was other trees called bamgalian. They were bigger yet. They were like 1.5 feet, 18 inches or something. Big trees all through there. But they were far enough apart I could drive between them. Or I thought I could. Anyway, I got it going, got the cable on, and I still haven't given up. And I start heading through these trees to get down to the other side so I could get it turned around by the slew and pull the tractor through. Anyway, I'm standing and I'm going through there with a clutch in one hand and the steering wheel in the other, and I'm going through, you know, a little at a time, trying to get around these trees. And I finally got, so I had those was a pretty tight deal to go through these two trees. And I give it a little clutch to go, and it rolled ahead, and I was trying to steer, and I couldn't steer good enough, and the right front wheel hit the big tree and broke the axle right off. The tractor just went down on the right side like that. And I thought, oh, I've had it. Now I've really had it. And I don't know if you can understand that kind of a feeling. Total failure. And all started with me doing what I shouldn't have done. That even made it worse. So I went in the house and I just sat at the kitchen table and waited. I thought, well, nothing I can do. About 4:30, the old 29 Chev rolled into the yard, and they got out, and for some reason Dad didn't come in right away. He looked around and he couldn't, the tractor was missing, as you could just see it was missing. And he thought, where the heck's going on here? Goes walking around, he looks towards the tank. He can see the tank is smashed in. Oh, and he said, look, what is going on? And he's just shaking his head. And finally, he walks down to the barn, and he's looking there. And he looks behind the barn, and here's the Alice Chalmers sitting in the slough. Oh my God. He looks to the left, and he looks through the big trees, and he can see the heart part sitting in the trees, bent over on one side, with the axle broke. And I just sat in the house and I waited. He stayed out for quite a while. He walked around and around the yard. Around and around. Finally he came in. He sat down. He didn't look at me or anything, but he just come in, sat down. I think he had coffee and whatever. And I'm waiting. I'm thinking, well, when the heck is the shoe going to drop here? And I waited, and nothing. He never said nothing. Not a nothing. So that went on that night, and I thought, well, what the heck? You know, how is he going to fix it? I don't know. I got to go to school tomorrow morning, and I don't know. And I forget after that. I think I kind of blanked it out of my mind. I was so disgusted with myself. Anyway, he never once in my life ever said anything to me about that. A few days later, he had the tractor back up fixed somehow. He had the tank put back together, and he had gotten the tractor out of there. I had no idea how he got him out of there, but he got it all back to shape again. And never said a word to me. Never said a word. That happened to me all my life. That's how he treated me. In my whole life, as his son, I never heard one cross word. Ever. He treated me like I was a prince or something, and I couldn't understand it. Sometimes he'd be sitting and he'd just be looking at me, and I'd think, what is going on? It made me uncomfortable, actually. But it wasn't like, if it was for me, it just like automatic, whatever Arlo wants. And, how two people could treat their son like that all his life is hard to believe, but they did. They were just like, well, like I say, they idolized me or something. Thought the sun set on me. And it really bothered me, but, they were, they was, they were so, uh, you know, supportive of me that it was unbelievable. But anyway, that went on all the time I was home, and afterwards, when I was married and everything else, if they come to visit, it was just if we came out to the farm, it was, what can we do for you? Yeah, and I at the time I didn't appreciate it all that much because I got so used to it. But later on, I started to realize how how they honored me. I couldn't really believe it. But anyway, that's the parents I had on this planet. Could never have got anything better. Never. Money couldn't have bought it. Nothing. So I'm going to leave it at there now, and going to say that I'm grateful, really grateful that I had parents like that. Nothing but good memories from them. Nothing. Just good memories. Yeah, I just hope that I just hope that they're going to be okay. And that's all we're going to talk about tonight, I believe. So God bless you, and we'll see you later.